refresh really quickly. Give it a little 15 seconds. All right, here we go. We're good.
Nice. Okay, cool.
Okay, everyone, welcome to Folio's third workshop of the summer. I'm Kathy, the CEO of Folio, and your host for the summer. And today I'm super stoked to introduce our guest, Steve from OpenAI. Steve is a stellar engineer, of course, but he's also a founder who studied film at the University of Michigan. Steve has worked in security at Barracuda, fintech at Braintree, and travel at Sonder, and his own company, Trava. There's a ton we could cover in this conversation, but I'll let Steve do his introduction first, and then we'll jump into questions. Does that sound okay?
Sounds great.
Go, go for
Cool.
it.
Yeah. Awesome. So yeah, just quick high level intro on myself. Great introduction. Thank you, Kathy. I'm Steve. I've worked in software engineering for a little over 10 years. Currently work at OpenAI, where I work on a team that ships products in OpenAI's API. So helping um, OpenAI bring the capabilities of our frontier models and some of the smaller models and all of the AI models that we ship to developers. So if you're building an AI application, you can use OpenAI's APIs to sort of bring those capabilities into your apps and services, sort of helping businesses of all sizes do that. But to back up, I grew up in Michigan, same as Kathy. We know each other from college. I went to Michigan, studied film. Actually, had intended to go to study computer science and film, but I, in a little bit of poor decision making, got a C plus in my first computer science class and dropped that. And so I only studied film. And then I kind of found my way back to it senior year, where I did a project where we kind of built an app for the university to help. It was a sort of an alcohol education program, so that students could kind of like um, keep track of how they were doing when they went out to the bars at night. And that really got me back into like a love of building things, and kind of like really inspired me to like start getting back into software engineering. And that was my senior year. A little bit too late to switch majors at that point, so kind of was able to parlay that into my very first job, where I worked at a really small company in Southfield, Michigan, whose whole business was creating apps for radio stations. And basically the whole thing was like, we have like a templatized app. If you were like 102.5 WXYZ, my hometown radio shout out, then you would get an app. If you were like 93.9 down the street, you would get an app. They looked exactly the same. And so we were just like pumping these things out. Didn't love it. It was a long commute, and just like the work wasn't that interesting. So I only stayed there for a few months, and then ended up working at Barracuda, as Kathy said, where I worked kind of like on a mobile team where we were building sort of a cloud storage product, kind of like Dropbox. Um, it never really took off. It was called Copy, but worked on that for a couple of years, and then almost exactly 10 years ago, moved out to San Francisco to work at a company called Braintree, which is a payments company. It's very similar, if anybody's familiar with Stripe or PayPal. It's very similar to those. It allows merchants to accept payments online for their goods and services. And I was working on a team there that basically shipped products for developers to be able to integrate payments into their mobile apps. So if anybody's ever done any mobile development, maybe used like an SDK or standard development kit before, this is kind of the product that we were shipping at that company. Uh, Spent a couple years there, and then I moved to a travel company called, where I was also helping them build the mobile application. Found it's like verticalized Airbnb, where they take apartment buildings and refurbish them to be sort of hotel-like, and then they rent them out as for short-term stays, sort of like a cross between an Airbnb and a hotel. And we shipped a mobile app there where we enabled people to do like request towels and get a late checkout and things like that on the mobile team there for a few years. And then I did left to go do a startup with two of my really close um, colleagues from Sonder, the engineering manager on my team and the product manager on my team. And love to talk about that a little bit more. But the long and short of it is we built four products over 2 years. Eventually ran out of money. One of them was a travel company. One of them was a financial services product. One of them was sort of like a prosumer product for doing like financial analytics. Just kind of like threw all the spaghetti at the wall. And then after that wound down, I took about 4 months off and then came to OpenAI, where I'm now building APIs for developers. So yeah, we'll pause there. Uh, yeah, Kathy, would love to answer any questions you have or
Awesome. Yeah. So we had a bunch of students who were really excited about your career journey because
Mhm,
one, you're sort of at the forefront of an industry that is disrupting a lot of things, which is great.
mhm,
And we have a lot of students that are questioning what they should study in college.
mhm,
And you come from a non-traditional background, which is awesome. So maybe the first question we'll start with is from the beginning of your studies. So you studied film. Why film?
mhm.
What were your professional aspirations when you first went into college? And then how did they change as you studied more, tried more things, then eventually graduated?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the reason I wanted to study film is because I had just like found this hobby in high school. My friends and I had found where we just like loved to make like stupid videos. We would just go and like, kind of mess around and film stuff, and I would take these all this footage home, and then I got really into like editing. And I think I've always had a love of like just like using great tools, especially like on the computer. I've like always really had an affinity towards like always been a bit of a nerd in that way, and so I think I found this outlet for that, as being like a just like something I could really it's something I really go deep on. So really just would love to like take all this footage and edit it and then like post them on YouTube or do whatever. And that kind of like spurred a love of just like being creative, and kind of like making these like fun videos. And so I thought like, oh, maybe film school would be a good way to like sort of use this creative outlet that I found. And so, yeah, but I mean, it's really interesting because film school at Michigan is kind of like three parts. There's a history component where you're kind of studying the different movements throughout, since like film was kind of invented in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And then you're studying, there's a theory component where you're kind of studying, like, um, how different, basically just like studying individual films and kind of like what they mean, what the directors were trying to get across. And then there's a production component, which is the only component that I like, really, really liked, because then you're kind of like hands-on with the camera, um, and doing a lot of the editing and doing a lot of that stuff. And so I think there's kind of like a technical creative element to that that I like really, really enjoyed. And so that's kind of like why I decided to pursue it. Coming out after graduation, I was applying to kind of both, well, maybe to back up for a second, sort of in that process, I had gotten involved with doing a lot of sort of like commercial style productions. So these are productions that are like have for like a specific client. Like we did some videos for the University of Michigan where we made a video for that the university sent to everybody who was admitted in the class of, I think it was like 2016 or 2015. We made a video for like some of their various different programs, and so we were kind of like doing a lot of these like commercial productions. And so after college, I thought I'll go work at an ad agency, and like kind of be working like on the ground to be like making these like short productions. Didn't really think that I was going to move to LA and work in like um like theatrical productions, but thought it would be much more on the ad side.
Wow. Um, and you did you end up taking any like internships or doing any, I guess other than Filmic, which actually shout out to Filmic, incredible productions, by the way. Also like back then
Thank you.
without all of this like intense software that we have. So
Yeah.
just side note to anyone in the audience, look up Filmic at the University of Michigan. But did you do anything outside of Filmic professionally in film?
Um, we had We actually had the only internship I ever had in college actually was a collective internship with all the people in Filmic, and we worked at Michigan has a creative studio actually that does all of their sort of like internal work, and so we actually all interned there one summer. I think it was like summer of 2011,
Nice.
and that was really great. But I don't think I did any professional work outside of that.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So the student organization you're a part of, which was basically like a professional organization, did you all get paid for the work that you did? Sorry,
We
silly
did.
question.
I mean, not
You
a
did?
lot,
Okay.
but yeah, I think all the money that we ever made too, we just like spent it on like more gear and like lenses and things like that. I don't think I ever actually saw any of the money that we made. But yeah, we did make some money.
Awesome. Okay, so you were like a startup in itself. So this is maybe like a precursor to your future career.
Yeah, a little bit.
Awesome. And so you'd mentioned before that when you originally started school, you were considering computer science and film,
Hmm.
and you sort of dropped out of the computer science stuff. So how did you get back into computer science?
Yeah, so I dropped it. So the first class I took was like a C++ class. It was a huge class. A lot of the students there had already had some computer science experience or had like experimented with programming on their own. And so just like from the get-go, being surrounded by all these people who like really seemed to know what they were doing and me having never even tried this before, it seemed like very overwhelming. Then on top of that, like not getting a good grade in the class kind of like put me off. And so I was like, oh, maybe this isn't really my thing after all. Um, so took a couple years off of that, and then I got back into it because I decided to take, I had like a random elective slot open my junior year, and so it was like, maybe I will take another computer science class. And so I took a kind of a version of that same class that was taught in Python, just like a much easier programming language to get acquainted with. And it was kind of not for computer scientists. It was kind of like a program kind of in the informatics and computer science crossover program. So all that to say that it was just much more practical, and the things we were working on were just not so much theory based and much more just like practical applications. And I really like that. I found myself spending a lot more time on that than I did on like all my other work, just because I was just like
Mhm.
really, really interested in it. And that was kind of the first clue to like, okay, maybe I should have just switched majors at that point. So I took that class, it was found it really interesting, took another one the following semester. And then, yeah, kind of following that, I had gotten this idea actually, sorry, during that class, the second one that I took, I had met somebody in my class and we kind of had this idea of like, oh, maybe we'll like take these. The University of Michigan used to give you these like little cards. This is crazy to think about now in 2025, but they used to give you these little cards that you would carry around, and it would say like, okay, how many drinks have you had on one side, and like what's your weight on the other axis, and then it was like a table, and you could say like, okay, what's my estimated BAC, and it's kind of to help kids like stay safe when they're like out drinking. And we were like, what if we just turn this into an app? And so kind of like over Christmas break one year, I decided to try to figure out how to take the limited skills that I had and build an app. And then we took the idea to the university, the like administrator for that program, like after we got back from school, and then sold that idea to them, and then like built the app. So that's kind of
Wow.
like how I got back into it.
Wow, that's so satisfying to build something and then sell it to the university to use. That's great. Oh my gosh, what better feedback loop than,
Exactly.
someone
Yeah, they
actually
were
doing something?
excited, and I think they're like students coming to them with those sort of things. They're like really excited um, to like have students be leading the charge on stuff like that. So they were like, "Yeah, let's do this. This is great." And we were like, weren't it like wasn't that much money, so they were like, "Yeah, this is like a rounding error in our budget." So,
That's awesome. So that was your junior year going into senior year, and then you
mhm,
graduated,
mhm,
and you dove into a software developer role. So
mhm.
it sounds like at that point, senior year, you had basically decided film was not going to be your professional trajectory. Is that right?
I think actually I thought this all the way up until graduation. Even
Oh.
after graduation, I was still kind of applying for both these like ad agency roles, which I just like wasn't hearing back from at all. And then I think somebody else told me, it was like, "Oh, you like did this project. You should consider being a software engineer." It had never really like occurred to me before. And then I was like, okay, like sure, I'll try it. Like we're applying for jobs, like might as well just apply for some of these. And
Yeah.
I applied for a couple, and it was at that time too. I mean, this has kind of always been the case, but very much like kind of like a very in demand profession. And so just hearing like a way more from recruiters in that space, and so that was like, okay, there's definitely I definitely like this. There's something here. It's going to be like much easier for me to find a job, most likely. And so let's just try to pursue this. And so that's kind of how I made the decision or fell into it, I guess.
Nice. Yeah. A need for a job after graduation, which makes
Exactly. Yeah. Imagine that.
sense. Um, awesome. Do you remember what it was like to work full time for the first time? Did it feel surprising or did it feel natural?
It was really unnatural, I think. It was a big adjustment. kind of going from a situation where, especially my last semester at Michigan, was pretty. I didn't really have. I had only a partial class load. I think I was only taking like 8 credits. And so I had a lot of free time. I think for the previous 3 semesters, I had never had Friday classes. I just tried to organize my schedule that way. And so, you kind of go from this very choose your own adventure lifestyle to one that is very much on a regular schedule. And I think that's a big adjustment. And so just like driving to work every day, sitting at my desk for 8 hours, just kind of doing the same thing a day every day took me probably a couple months to like really fully get used to. Uh, and um, yeah, so I think that was kind of like the biggest adjustment is just kind of going from a big change in schedule.
Yeah, right. Ultimate
Yeah,
flexibility and freedom to then having to show up at a certain
exactly.
time and act a
Exactly.
certain way.
Right. Right.
Fair. So what did you do? I guess you were only at the first company for like a handful of months, is that right?
Hmm.
About 6 months or
Yeah.
so?
Like
Okay, cool. So maybe
even
we'll
like
just
not
sort
even
of,
3 months. Yeah. We can
oh,
just
not
skip
even
that.
3 months.
Yeah.
Wow, quick. Okay. Do you want to talk about it and like how you realized that it wasn't a good fit and how you went to transition to Barracuda?
Yeah, totally. Basically, so it was a really small consultancy in Southfield. I think there were maybe 5 people that worked there.
Mhm.
I think there was a kind of a couple of things that fed into me not really liking it. It felt like the quality of work was really low. Um, and the kinds of products that we were building weren't really that interesting to me. Uh, Also, I mean, just really practically, the commute was really bad. I think I was driving almost an hour to and from where I was living. And so kind of all those things fed in together to kind of like me not like I think I liked it. I think I would have stayed. And then I ended up even thinking about leaving because a recruiter reached out to me from Barracuda. And Barracuda was their office at the time was like a 5 minute walk from my where I was living. So it was like, okay, this is like definitely seems cool. I went there and I talked to some people. There was like a lot more people that were the product seemed a lot more interesting. The folks that I met were so like very close in age to me. And so I was like, yeah, sure, I'll like try this out. And so I ended up just leaving after a couple months and finding the work at Barracuda to be a lot more rewarding and interesting.
Okay. Yeah. And you worked in mobile at Barracuda and then also at Braintree? Like what did you
Yes.
you did? Okay, great.
Hmm.
Why mobile? Was that like just a unique skill to have at the time or something you were interested in?
I think it was a little bit of both. I think the why mobile part is because the first that project I worked on in college was a mobile app, and so like all of my experience, basically like all you know, all like 3 months of it at that point was like in mobile development. And so then when I went to this consultancy in Michigan, it was also doing mobile stuff. And so like so then when I left, and then mobile was kind of like the only thing that I was like really qualified to even work on. And so, but also at the time, like mobile was going crazy. This is the era of there's an app for that, and iPhones are blowing up, and Androids are really starting to take off, and people are really starting to switch to smartphones in a big way. Now, looking back, it seems inevitable, but even at that time, in sort of like 2011, 2012, like not everyone had an iPhone, not even everyone really had a smartphone,
Mhm.
and so that was really starting to take off, and all of the possibilities of like what you could do on a mobile device were starting to be discovered. And so that was definitely like a really popular sort of like engineering path.
Okay, yeah. So you made a wise decision to invest in skills that you thought were going to be, future proof.
Yeah, I wouldn't give myself so much credit as to give myself the like long-term arc of that, but that is what happened. Yeah.
Okay, cool, cool, cool. We'll give you credit.
Okay.
Um, okay, so you were in Ann Arbor for, was it 2 years, 3 years?
2 years.
2 years. Okay, great. And then you decided to move across the country
Hmm.
to Braintree. So, like,
Yeah.
can you tell us about that transition? Like, that's a big change.
Yeah.
Did you always know
I
you
think
wanted to do it, or was it something just opportunistic?
I think I definitely wanted to leave Ann Arbor after a couple years. There kinds of comes a time if you stay in, I mean, Ann Arbor's a great city, and there's a lot of things to do as an adult, but I think like there kind of comes a time if you've been there for a couple of years where a lot of your friends move out and they like move to Chicago, they move to New York, they move to San Francisco, and then you start to think like, oh, maybe I should also be kind of like moving on and doing something else. And so there was an element of that. There was also an element of like, okay, my career is definitely happening in software engineering. Like, where's the best place to be in software engineering?
Mhm.
That's at that time still is San Francisco. Definitely felt like the big leagues of tech. And so there was definitely a desire to like want to be where all the action was happening. And then on top of that, like one of actually both of our Kathy and I's really good friends had just moved to San Francisco. We had been living together at the time, and he moved out there, and 6 months later, he was like, "Okay, you gotta like this is where everything's happening. You gotta come in." So like all of those three things together was like, "Okay, yeah, let's do this." And so I did a search between New York and San Francisco, kind of thinking like maybe I'll go to New York, like that'd be fun, but ultimately decided on moving to San Francisco. And so I interviewed at a handful of places in San Francisco, kind of like anticipating wanted to make that move, and then ended up at Braintree.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
And how do you feel about San Francisco? Are you like, I'm a lifer, or are you gonna escape to New York anytime soon?
I like it. I mean, I actually am coming up on my 10-year anniversary in San Francisco. I moved there on the
Mm,
mid July 2015. And I still love it. I think it's got a great mix of the weather is not great, but it is good enough. It
mm,
doesn't get cold, unlike Michigan. There's a lot of things to do outside the city. You can go biking, you can go running. There's a lot of really great nature um, right around the city, which is amazing. I have a ton of friends here now, and I met my wife here, and we like live in a place in San Francisco, and so I think definitely there's an element of like there being roots here. I think that being said, I'm not 100% sure we'll stay here forever, but my wife's family is also from California, and so that also anchors us here a little bit.
yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
So speaking of incredible people, like your wonderful wife,
Mhm.
when you were at Braintree, you worked with some awesome people. How did the people and culture at Braintree shape who you are as a professional?
Yeah, totally. I think that like one thing that I really loved about Braintree that I have always tried to make like espouse in every team that I've been on since then is just this like really cool spirit of collaboration. Braintree is like really unique. I've never worked in another company like this where they full-time pair program. This means you come
Mhm.
in, you have like an assigned pair for your week. So it'll be like somebody else in your team and you're on some work stream. You come in, you sit down, you're sitting in front of like one keyboard, one computer, and you're just taking turns going on and off, talking about the problem you're trying to solve, making progress throughout the week. And that is just an incredible way to collaborate. It definitely took some getting used to because it's exhausting at first, just, constantly talking through everything. Whereas normally you would kind of like focus on problems individually. And so that definitely took a little bit of getting used to, but I would say that there's no better way to learn, especially as somebody who's early on in their career, than pair programming with somebody who's been around for a few more years than you or knows that specific domain really well. And so I really love that. And I've like always tried to say whenever have been on different teams throughout my career, like um, we don't have to do full-time pair programming, but like if there's a problem that somebody needs some help with, the best way to help them with it is like let's sit down and pair on it for an hour. And then like if it's something that I'm not as familiar with and like I learn a ton, if it's something the other person's not familiar with, and hopefully they learn a ton. And it's just like a really great like collaborative way to work. And so that's the thing that I really appreciated the most about Braintree, like ton of really smart people, really easy to work with, and then just the working style was conducive to getting good work done.
Wow, full-time paid programming is, I feel like that's like the opposite of the way people work today, right? We're
Yeah.
mostly remote and silent. Do they still do it? Do you know if they still do it?
I don't know if they still do it. I think they do,
Oh,
but I don't know anybody who still works there, so I haven't gotten an update. But
okay.
yeah, it's definitely
Wow, that's
definitely
great.
unique.
And is it always someone like a mentor and a mentee, or could you sort of be also on the same level? Like, would it, do they intentionally like put people into pairs, or it just like a DIY situation?
It was pretty laissez-faire, I would say. It wasn't always like somebody who's more experienced than you. I think it was could definitely be two peers kind of working on something together.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. That's awesome. I'm gonna look more into it now. That
Yeah.
is truly a great, great way to learn, whether you're entry level or not, because there's always
Hmm.
something to learn from someone else, and
Totally. Yeah.
great way to share ideas.
Yeah. 100%.
Sort of, I guess, brings me to the second question someone asked. What type of person would thrive at Braintree, and then what type of person would not?
Interesting. I think this is kind of kind of gets back to what I was just saying about the collaborative aspect. I think that Braintree like really uh we okay, so the type of person that we didn't really have at Braintree that I have worked with at other companies is like the chief architect, you know, we're gonna do like I'm gonna draw up the plans for how we're gonna build this thing, and then we're gonna do it like my way. That's not really the type of person that like works at Braintree. I think like we that the like whole ethos was that like really good ideas can come from anywhere. We're going to like collaborate on everything. We're going to build everything together. I think like one of the values was build together actually, and so I think that like people who were bought into that mentality would thrive, and people who really preferred to work solo and like had a hard time adjusting to like the pair programming collaborative culture um, didn't really do as well.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. All right. Your next stop in your career journey was Sonder.
Mhm.
Why did you decide to join Sonder? What drew you to the company?
Yeah, there was I think I was really excited about the so like okay, just to set this at the scene a little bit. This is I joined Sonder in 2018. And so this is like really when this is kind of like after Airbnb is like really picked up into the mainstream. And so I think I got really excited about doing something different after having been at Braintree for 3 years. I wanted to work on sort of more of a Braintree is very much a developer product that doesn't really have any customer uh, most people don't even know what Braintree is, even though they might be using it when they like pay for an Uber or do something else. And so I really wanted to work on something that was a bit more product driven, a bit more customer product driven. And so I was really excited about Sonder because I love travel. And it seemed like a really, novel company. It was much smaller than Braintree at the time. I think the engineering team is only 15 people. And so I was really excited about working at a very much smaller company, having a lot more impact, and then kind of like learning a new stack and learning some new technologies. And also, I think, but the thing that really sealed the deal was I talked to the director of engineering at the time, who also went to Michigan, and really liked him, really liked his vision. He was like seemed like a really good leader, and I was like, I just like really am excited about working with this person. And so, kind of like those combination of factors that really what drew me in.
Cool. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Sonder is also where you met your co-founders. Can I
Yes.
share more about your journey as a founder?
Yeah, totally. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so on this team that I was on, which was basically responsible for building and shipping the Sounder mobile app, I had the engineering manager on my team, a guy named Mike Kitson, who had started at Sonder maybe like 4 or 5 months before I had. We had been working like, we both stayed at Sonder for 3 years. We were working together the entire time, just like really closely collaborating. Just like somebody who I absolutely admire, very, very smart person. Really loved working with him. And then our product manager, Kotka, who joined a little bit after us, maybe a year after us, but same thing, like really enjoyed spending time with them. Thought they were both like some of the smartest people that I knew. They basically after time after about 2 years for Kaka, 3 years for Mike, they decided to like maybe we'll go and kind of do. Or they had been kind of like talking about like doing a company, and so they left around the same time and started chatting. And then a few months later, they hit me up and were like, "Steve, we think we have an idea. We've raised a little bit of money. Like, let's go and build this." And so I joined them as like their third co-founder, and then we built their the original product idea was kind of like a personal capital product where you could connect your different investment accounts and then get investment advice um, based on looking at all of your transactions and all your investments. At that time, this is 2021. Crypto was a really big thing at the time, and so we were really trying to like lean into that aspect of an investment product that would help support you in your crypto journey, whatever that was. And so this was kind of the first thing we built, the first of like of four things we built. But yeah, I mean, we worked at this for 2 years. We built four different products. Even though we only stayed the three of us, and it's definitely a tumultuous journey, Kathy, as you know, like we have stayed like really, really close, even to this day. And so that was like, um, just like a ton of fun, learned a ton. I think like you can't have like higher highs or lower lows in your career than doing a startup because you're kind of responsible for everything. Um, but yeah, it was just like a really cool, unlike working at a big company where you kind of like own a very small piece of a bigger product. At a startup, you're responsible for doing everything. So I was, building. So Mike and I both technical. Katka was the CEO. Mike and I were doing a lot of building, but also I was doing sales. I was doing marketing. We would do like product launches. We would like be uh, doing a lot of like cold outreach. And so everybody's kind of wearing a bunch of different hats and we're just all trying to see what's going to work. Um, so yeah, that's kind of like the high level raw take on that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess, gosh, there's so many like reflective questions I could ask you, but I don't want like I'm trying to figure out a way to get like the nuggets that will be helpful for the students. Let's see. Maybe a question that people typically ask is, what type of person do you think will thrive as a founder?
Mhm.
And then maybe we'll start there, and then we'll see where that
Yeah,
takes us.
that's a really good question. I actually think that the type of person who thrives as a founder is the type of person who has like a just absolute tunnel vision on like their idea and the absolute conviction that they can make their idea happen. Because this happens, I don't have that at all, and neither did my co-founders, and we're all like very upfront about that. And I
Mm,
think unless you have that, then it's like very easy to get discouraged
mm,
when something is not working. And the first iteration of an idea often, very, very often, will not work. And it takes a few iterations, and you don't, because you have this idea, you think like, oh, people will use this, and maybe you talk to some friends and they say, oh yeah, we would love that. And then you build it and you launch it, and yeah, sure, like people might use it a little bit, but they might not use it a lot, or they might not use it as much as they need to be using it, or you might have like only found like a really specific niche of people and you can't really grow beyond that. And so like you need to then iterate and build on your idea until you kind of find that viral loop or whatever it is that like really solves a lot of problem for a lot of people. It depends too on if you're building in consumer or if you're building sort of B2B. I'm kind of thinking more on the consumer side because that was what we had been trying to build at that time. um,
mhm,
and so if you don't have that like absolute conviction, then you might get discouraged after two or three of those iteration cycles, like, oh, this just isn't working.
mm,
We should just like totally do something different. Where you might actually find the thing after five or six or seven or 10 iteration cycles. And that thing probably looks completely different than it did when you first had that original idea. And so you just have to like be willing to grind it out through all of that and just get a ton of feedback from customers and deal with a ton of rejection and everybody telling you it's a bad idea and all of the negative things you could possibly imagine. You have to really push through all of that, and that only comes with just like unwavering conviction that your idea has merit.
yeah, that's so funny because it feels like as someone I know you well enough. I'm like I know you're super smart. It's almost like it's so counterintuitive to tell someone who is data oriented, right, and like likes to make scientifically proven decisions to say like
Hmm.
just forget about all of that and be somewhat maniacal and just go after
Yes,
it.
totally,
Yeah.
100%.
And you're just for context, so Steve's wife Sonia is a founder,
Mhm.
and so you live with it, so you see it every
Yes,
day. So
totally. Yeah,
yeah, that's awesome.
yeah.
Did you feel like when you were sort of building your company and Sonia's building hers, could you feel the difference between the two of you and the level of conviction and like the way you
I think so. Yeah, totally. I think we're also at very different stages because Sonia started her startup a couple years before we did ours, and so they were like a little bit farther along than we were at that time. But oh, I had something I was going to say about that. But there was definitely like it was definitely really interesting. Oh, that was the thing I was gonna say is like her doing the startup and seeing how much fun she was having was definitely something that got me really excited about doing it myself. Um, and so, then when we started ours, it was really interesting to talk to her about these things that she was kind of going through in her day-to-day life that I had never really considered before, wasn't really hearing about. And I would come home
Mhm.
and be like, oh man, like we tried to sell our product to somebody and they didn't want it. And she was like, yeah, yep, that's gonna happen. And just like having a little bit of that like support group at home was like really nice. And then also her being able, she's like you learn a ton just about like the realities of starting a business, and there's a surprising amount of like tips and tricks, I would say.
Mm,
Especially around some of like the more like the legal aspects of how do you do an 83B election, and like what's the best way to like issue stock to like other people that work at the company, and like all of those things she's already been through before, and so it's just
mhm.
really helpful to have like a playbook for those things. um but yeah, there's definitely a lot of help that we were getting as sales tactics, things like this. Like, well, we were getting a lot of help from Sonia.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you think you'd ever want to do it again?
I think about it. I really like where I'm at now. I think like uh I like really, really enjoy working at OpenAI and I enjoy working on a bigger team. That being said, I think that, you know, I like wish that I had more time for side projects and like little, you know, micro SaaS ideas and like things like this that are kicking around that I don't really have time for now. And so, yeah, maybe at some point in the future, I'd love to give it another go, but um, not on the not on the short term horizon.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, so on to OpenAI, a
Yeah,
company we all know and love, which is great. What makes OpenAI special?
yeah. I think like without question, it's the people. The people that work at OpenAI are like the smartest people that I've ever worked with. The talent bar is like so insanely high, and the talent density is so insanely high that I'm like constantly learning stuff. Like really, really, really enjoy working with everybody on my team. They're like the best at what they do, and so like that. And also on top of that, they're all really nice and really easy to work with, and like that is a really, really rare and special combination. And so this is my consistent answer whenever I get this question is like the people are incredible.
Mhm. Awesome. All right. Well, I guess you already shared a bit about what you're working on. Do you want to share a bit more about what you're working on?
Yeah, yeah, totally.
Okay,
So
cool.
I'm on a team called the API capabilities team, which is a little bit abstract, but roughly that means when the models can do something new, then we ship those in the APIs. So a really concrete example of that is the maybe 2 years ago, we when we launched GPT 4.0, it has the ability to emit not just text, but it can also speak to you like a person. If you anybody's ever used advanced voice mode in ChatGPT, this is something that was kind of a new capability at that time. And so we are like, okay, let's figure out how to make an API around this so that you can talk in real time to the model, so people can build customer support agents. People can build drive-through menu ordering systems where you're like kind of talking to an AI and it's just like transcribing your order. You can kind of imagine the whole host of things you can build when the modality between yourself, the user, and the model is voice. And so we basically like designed an entire API around this like kind of like real-time voice capability. And then we shipped this to developers so that they could kind of like build this into their own application. So this in a nutshell is kind of like what we do is we take these like new model capabilities and then them available to developers to put in their applications.
Awesome. Do you ever get to work with, I guess, do you work with your potential customers to try to design something that they would be, okay, yeah, so you're sort of like on
Yeah.
the both the product and engineering side. Makes
Yes,
sense.
totally. Yeah. That's another thing I love about working at OpenAI too, is that people are like, especially as opposed to the startup, which I was doing right before this, is, we would want to get feedback on our products at the startup, but you can't even pay somebody to talk to you. Like nobody cares,
Mhm.
right? Especially when like your product has no users and it's just three-person company. At OpenAI, people are really excited to talk to you and they really want to share your feedback. And so like the that product iteration loop is really, really fast.
Mhm.
And people are really, really willing to give you a ton of really specific feedback, which is awesome. And so like that's a part of the job that I really love is sort of like working with customers to design APIs that will help them do something that they want to do.
Yeah, it sounds very satisfying. Nice.
Yeah, totally.
Um, all right. Well, a bunch of students obviously are like, fans of OpenAI, so they're curious,
Cool.
what does your team look for in exceptional teammates?
Yeah, totally. I think that like one thing that I think that like the thing we like really value is it's kind of like a few like unspoken principles at OpenAI, one of which is like I'm sure you've heard the Twitterism, you can just do things, right? I think we really look for people that are like willing, like super motivated, really willing to like go and like unblock themselves, and kind of like figure out who you need to work with in order to sort of achieve some goal. And that's like it's a hard skill to teach, but like it's kind of one of those things where you really know it when you see it. And I think that like those are the types of people that like I really love working with is like you can just like I can just be like, hey, I need you to like just figure this out, and there's kind of like a vague it's kind of like a vague prompt, and the ability to kind of just like go and figure it out and kind of like navigate the corporate structure or whatever is like a really super valuable skill. And also people that are just like kind of the Braintree thing, just people who are like easy to work with, kind, collaborative, all that stuff.
Yeah, makes sense. We talk about it as like you don't need permission to figure things out, or you don't need
Yeah.
permission to be able to solve it on your own, etc.
Mhm.
Um, but it is pretty counterintuitive, right? Because our education system usually gives us a rubric, and it's pretty strict. So,
Yes, exactly.
um,
I think that's so
lots
true.
of good unlearning to do.
Hmm.
Do you feel like that was a skill that you've always had, or was it something that you had to learn along the way?
No, I definitely don't think it's a skill I always had. I have never really been sort of a like a rule. I wouldn't even say like, the you can just do things as like even like a rule breaking ethos, but like even to the extent that it is, like I never had that. And so I definitely think like coming to OpenAI and kind of like trying to learn how to swim and like find my sea legs a little bit here is like definitely like taught me that quite a bit. I
Mm,
think also like part of that stuff just comes with time. Like once you have more confidence in your ability to get things done, then you will find ways to get those things done and not feel as though you need to like ask for permission or do anything like this. And so I definitely think it's something I learned even within the last like 2 years.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe like we're always constantly learning it, right? Because things are moving so
Yeah.
fast. We have to react
Yeah,
and
totally.
keep up. Oh, this is an interesting question. We often think about how AI will affect entry-level jobs, but
Hmm.
we also believe that AI can help us learn faster and be incredibly productive. What are some common skills gaps you see in entry-level software engineers today, which maybe they
Hmm.
could fill the gaps using AI tools?
Yeah, interesting. I think that there's like some really tactical ones that I would say, and I think this is like definitely a symptom of the way that schools teach computer science. And I think that like you go to school and you get a degree in computer science. Maybe this is less true now. I hope it is. But at least when I was in school, computer science is very, very, very different than software engineering. Computer science is learning algorithms and learning how a compiler works and learning, you know, uh, discrete math and all of these things that you really don't use that much in day to day. You like learn how to code, like write code and understand code, and like that's kind of the degree of the overlap. But like software engineering is like how you solve practical problems, how you think about systems, how you think about like building blocks, how you think about like black boxes and how they work together, how you think about like resiliency, how you think about availability and reliability of your systems, and those are like things that like they don't even touch on. And so like I think that like the things that we often find ourselves like teaching uh folks that are coming to us like relatively early in their careers is like all of the like infrastructural stuff that you just like don't really ever touch in a computer science program. Like if anybody's heard of like Kubernetes, right? It's like a big like container ecosystem for like running your like big fleets of workloads. And so like this is like a bedrock of a lot of companies, OpenAI included. And folks are coming and they're not really knowing that much about that, but like who can blame them, right? They're not really learning this stuff in school unless they are working on stuff on the side and kind of like learning and picking up these skills. And so I think there's definitely an element of like people come in and they like know how to write code and they know like what an algorithm is and they know how to write an efficient algorithm, but putting the pieces all together and like actually writing like usable software is a very different skill that you often learn on the job. I didn't get a good degree in computer science, but even if I had, that would have been the case.
Okay. So it's almost in some ways like, well, I don't want to say it's helpful that you didn't have a degree in computer science, but you really learned the practical stuff by building an app, for fun over Christmas
Hmm.
break. So
Hmm.
that's great. All right, I know we're getting to time. Actually, we're over time right now. I'll ask one last question because I
Sure.
think a lot of folks were really interested in how you worked at Braintree. So
Hmm.
the question is, how do you approach seeking feedback and using it for improvement?
Yeah, totally. Um, I have always kind of had this mentality that like feedback is a gift, and so I definitely try to ask for it and also give it as much as possible. So I think, something that I do a lot, have always kind of like learned to do is just like after is like always do like retros on projects. And so, one example is like this is an OpenAI example, not Braintree specific, but going back and we back in March we shipped this like really big new API product, and so after that, a few weeks later, we kind of had this retro. We're like, okay, let's talk about like how things went. This is like feedback for everyone on the team. Like, how can we work better together? It's very much like a blameless system, um, and like yeah, how can we like all learn from what we did together? How can we like do things better? What are the things we can improve? Like that sort of stuff. But also just like on a personal level, if I like work with somebody on a project for like a few weeks, to just ask them like, hey, any feedback for like how I can be more productive or how we can work better together or anything like that. um, I think like this also plays out in like a pretty interesting way in terms of like how companies handle. This is also a commonality between how like OpenAI handles like an incident and how Braintree handles incident. By incident, I mean this, ChatGPT goes down for an hour, the API goes down for an hour, right? We call these at OpenAI SEVs, and so we always have a sort of there's a very regular process that happens. So, like say ChatGPT goes down, some people will be doing some root cause analysis. Then there will be a sort of like SEV review where we talk about like, okay, this is completely blameless. Like maybe somebody pushed the code that caused it to go bad, but like obviously they didn't intend to do this. So let's treat this as a blameless exercise. How can we let's talk about what happened. Let's talk about how we recovered from that. Let's talk about how we can prevent it from happening in the future. Um, and that is sort of like a feedback loop that happens sort of like at the team and company level that I think is like super valuable. And also really definitely like an interesting thing to kind of go through because my first thinking back to Braintree, like the first incident that I caused, and everybody causes an incident at some point. Many times, like you'll cause many incidents throughout the course of your career. It's just an inevitable fact of life. You feel like, oh God, like I did something horrible, and then kind of going through that, and everyone treats it as like, no, it's like not your fault. Like could happen to anybody. It just happened to be you, and then kind of like going through that thing is like a really like almost like cathartic exercise of like, okay, like we're all improving, we're all learning here. It's like something that even though it's like kind of a weird topic to like enjoy, like, oh, like something blew up and we have to talk about it. Like it's something I really enjoy.
Yeah. I mean, I do, just as a friend personally, I feel like you're one of
Mhm.
the easiest people to talk to about tough
Oh, thank
things.
you. Yeah,
And so, it doesn't surprise me that you're someone who loves the experience of like growing, even if it's painful in the beginning, right? You feel great after, and you realize
yeah,
that, yeah, we're all human and we wouldn't create new things if we didn't take risk. And part of risk is breaking things. That's
totally.
okay.
Yeah, exactly. 100%.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here today and for
Yeah,
extending over time. We're
yeah, no problem.
super
This is really fun.
grateful for you being generous with your time and wisdom. To everyone here, thank you so much for tuning in. We haven't officially announced it yet, but our next series of challenges will be with OpenAI, so that's exciting. Steve is going to be recording some special lessons on how to use OpenAI's tools at work, so look out for those soon. We are currently judging projects for this month's series with Canva, and we'll publish the winners and top performers early next week. So please look out for those. Okay, y'all, that's it. Happy building and see you on Discord. Thanks so much, Steve.
Thanks so
Bye, y'all.
much.
Take
See
care.
ya.